Kat, welcome to Strategy and Tragedy. You are the queen of positive habits, so I want to hit the ground running. If you have to choose just one single habit, what one positive habit would you recommend every entrepreneur listening to this does straight after listening to this episode?
Move your body. And I was about to say exercise, but I think exercise has a lot of negative connotations, and it certainly did for me growing up and in my adult life. So I would reframe exercise, move your body.
Love that. Yeah, I feel like exercise intrinsically has a bit of this like obligation and what does that mean? I have to like sign up to a workout class or go to a gym, but move your body. I love how you make it even just like sound so much more accessible,
Yeah,
doable.
because you could just literally pause this right now and get up and just go and get some fresh air, do a little dance, like whatever it is. And I think move your body. It has been life changing, transformative, and I know lots and lots of people who've heard me speak or worked with me who've done this as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's stick with this a sec. And by the way, gang, you don't need to pause this. Keep listening. You can have us in your earbuds, but move about, move your body. You can still listen to us while you're that is the benefit of listening to podcasts on the go. So I feel like we all know like movement is good for us. What are some ways that we can really manageably integrate it more into our daily lifestyle that doesn't need to be this like workout regime?
Okay, so this comes up, of course, all the time. And if I look back to what got me in a very difficult situation in my life, when I think about exercise, I think it's difficult. It takes a long time. And if I was to say to you, Steph, how long do you need to exercise for?
Mm.
And if I was to ask 5 other people, we would all give different answers. And that's because there isn't a book that tells us how long we need to move our bodies for or how long we need to exercise for. So I say to people, what about if you just did it for 10 minutes? And this 10-minute thing is a game changer. The thing is, though, is what's interesting about 10 minutes is automatically people think it's not enough.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm writing my book at the moment, and I've just written this whole chapter on 10 minutes and how people have actually made fun of me for doing it for 10 minutes. But when you compare, the alternative is no minutes. How good is 10 minutes now all of a sudden?
Yeah, fantastic. And I laugh when you say that then suddenly 10 minutes doesn't sound like that long because there is that there is that positive psychology around achieving something. You did it, you proved yourself that you can do it. So then it becomes so much more encouraging to do more, right?
Yeah.
And you think, okay, well, I'm already out and about moving my body and this feels good and I'm in the rhythm and maybe I'll stay out another 10 minutes.
Exactly. And also, it has this ripple effect. If you do something good for yourself, and it doesn't have to be exercise, it could be anything. You do something good for yourself for just 10 minutes, then you want to eat better, then you sleep better, then you're just a nicer person to be around. And it has this huge ripple effect. And that really is kind of my mission now, is to make 10 minutes acceptable,
Yeah.
but not just acceptable, but actually make it as people realize how powerful it really is.
And I'm fascinated by the deeper psychology here as well. I'm not sure how much of this you can speak to, but around keeping the promises that we make to ourselves. And it really, what you spring to mind for me there is the deep self-respect. The self-respect to take care of our bodies, to get a good night's sleep, to fuel our bodies in the right way. Is there any more on that side you can speak to at all?
I think in terms of my own life experience, waking up every single day and taking my body and my brain for granted, I think that was a massive lesson I learned the very, very hard way. And it's one of the reasons I started the Morning Game Changer and the work I'm doing. Because when you wake up one day and you don't have any feeling in your body, it's a very terrifying moment. And I think if you think about the majority of people and anyone listening to this, I would really encourage you to think about what were your first thoughts when you woke up this morning?
Yeah.
Because quite sure they're not, about your body.
Yeah.
You don't make that connection, do you, between your legs, and as you get out of bed, you don't think, oh, I can feel my legs.
Sure.
You're thinking about work. You're thinking about,
Totally take for
the
granted.
parking ticket you haven't paid for. You're thinking about getting your kids ready for school. We take it for granted. And I think what I'm trying to do is try to help people before they reach the point where it's taken away from them, or they have such an explosive moment in their life that sometimes they can't undo some of those
Yeah.
things.
So what's your origin story with this? What was the catalyst? Why did you wake up one morning and not being able to move? What's your story there?
So in 2016, I had the biggest wake up call, and it was the result of years of unhealthy and toxic habits. And I used to wake up every single morning. And by the way, at this point in my life, I was a global commercial director. I was working for this incredible tech company. I was working across a bunch of different teams across Europe. I was traveling all the time. I was planning my wedding. Like, I had an amazing life, but I thought I was untouchable. And I think a lot of high achievers, high performers, we think that we are untouchable. And I think a lot back then, I think a lot of these ideas like exercise and meditation, all these things, they were around, but it was almost like they were for other people.
Yeah.
I didn't need them. I was
Yeah.
like superhuman.
Yeah.
But and what's quite interesting, I think, about my story is that the things that I used to do, um, didn't affect my ability to perform really well. Like, I was one of the highest performing people in my company. Like, I just bought my first house. Like, on paper, I was really successful. But what I talk about now is how success is only sustainable with good habits. Like, you can achieve incredible levels of success in your life, but at some point it's going to catch up with you, and it's just a case of when, not if.
Mm.
And in 2016, my body said no more,
Mm.
and I nearly had a heart attack.
Wow.
And I think, but even that wasn't enough for me to
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
But that was the start. It was like, have a big explosion, lose pretty much everything in your life, start all over again, and then you'll start. That was when the journey started. But that's not when I started making the changes.
So what was it that took you to make these changes?
It was a happy accident, and it was getting woken up at 5 a.m. So at this point, I'd already moved to Portsmouth. I'd like lost my long-term relationship. I was married for just a few weeks. I'd literally started all over again. And because I was so embarrassed, I guess, about what had happened to me or what I'd done to myself, I quit my job, and I got headhunted, and I'd become a CEO, and it was like a dream job on the vision board. But I was in a really difficult position where I was given a year to turn it around, and I was trying everything I could think of. And all of a sudden, I start getting woken up by a partner I was with at the time at 5 a.m. And those first 3 days, I was pretty annoyed because at that point in my life, I used to wake up at like 6:45, 7, 7:15, 7:30. Like, literally, I was the person that would wake up 30 minutes before I had to be somewhere. And I had like a 30-minute get ready, get out the door, because I really prioritize sleep. But actually, secretly, I never slept well because of my habits. So it wasn't an intentional thing. It was because I always woke up tired. And I would do three things every single morning. I'd snooze my alarm 4 to 6 times. I'd check my phone with like one eye shut, which I now think is your brain's way of telling you you're not ready for that information. And then I would like go looking for some kind of caffeine. Actually, coffee wasn't my caffeine of choice back then. It was any kind of energy drink. I was Red Bull's biggest
What,
customer.
like first thing in the
Yeah,
morning?
yeah.
Ah,
And
hard.
yeah, and so those were the habit, just some of the habits, the toxic and unhealthy habits that were quietly draining me and my body in the background. But waking up at 5 a.m. was something I just did if I was going on a plane somewhere. It definitely wasn't like I'm part of the 5 a.m. club. And on the third morning of being woken up at 5 a.m., I remember thinking to myself, and I can honestly say, I think this was the first time I'd ever recognized, like consciously noticed a thought. And the thought was, this light bulb moment. It was like, Kat, you've got all this extra time now. If you wake up every day at 5 a.m., what could you do with all this time? And the answer was work. That was it. That was the golden answer to my problem of trying to turn this organization around. I wasn't working enough hours. And this was the default from growing up, a belief I had growing up, which was the harder you work, the more hours you do, the more successful you'll be. And that's literally how the rule book for my life. And so that morning, I caught that thought and said, no, if I do that, I'm going to be in the same mess I was in a few years ago. So instead, I turned to my bedside table, and almost everyone laughs when I say this because I think so many people can relate to this. I had a pile of books I had every intention of reading, but just
Yeah.
used to dust.
Yeah.
And that morning, I grabbed the top of the pile, and it was a book called The Miracle Morning, which is a brilliant read. But that morning, it wasn't really about the book, although the book kind of gave me a lot of new thoughts. But that morning, something changed in me. And it was like going into my day, really resisting, by the way, not looking at my phone and not having that usual morning routine. But it was like reading that book kind of calmed my nervous system. My heart wasn't racing, but I was getting excited about the content I was reading. And as they say, the rest is history. That was the first habit I created, and then I've been building positive habits ever since. And for me now, this is a lifelong journey. It's not something that just ends. It's a lifelong commitment to being the best version of myself.
Incredible. Well, Kat, I love that mission. And I definitely want to double click into the harder I work, the luckier I get. We need to talk about that. But before we do, I think what you've described here, like everyone can relate to the whole, like the hustling, these habits, and the listeners of my show are entrepreneurs. And I think that every single entrepreneur feels that pressure on them to build the business, to find, some money so they can pay all the bills at the end of the month. It's an immense pressure that it can feel incredibly counterintuitive to do some of those things, to actually slow down. Quick interview interruption. I really hope you are enjoying the conversation, but I have something to recommend to you. Now, first and foremost, guys, I do not recommend anything that I don't use myself personally or that I can vouch for. And this next recommendation is no exception. In fact, if you've met me in person and you know me IRL, there's a very high chance that I've told you about this tool. It is Dripify. Now, you can head straight to the show notes for the unique affiliate link. Dripify is LinkedIn automation, outreach, and nurture on autopilot. Now, one of the reasons why I love this so much is because I'm here, there, and everywhere. I'm often here in the studio, I'm in meetings, I might even be traveling, delivering a talk overseas perhaps, and I need to make sure that I have got systems, that I have got tools, that I have got things working for me in the background, so it doesn't mean that if I'm off busy doing something else, everything suddenly grinds to a standstill and comes to a halt. So tools like Dripify, where you can have this system constantly working for you in the background, is an absolute game changer. I've got a very lean team. I don't have my own internal sales teams to be able to do that themselves manually, personally. Instead, I set it and forget it with this incredible tool. You can set up different campaigns. The insights are fantastic. You can even message back prospects on LinkedIn through the platform. Honestly, check it out if you haven't already heard of it. Again, head to the link in the show notes. I've got my own personal affiliate link that you can use. Let me know how you get on. In the meantime, let's jump back into the episode. So what I'm cognizant of is you said that you had this horrific episode. Even that on its own, this heart attack, wasn't enough. It was this next thing that actually catalyzed that real change in you. I relate to that. I've had burnout twice. So again, it wasn't the first burnout that made me make any changes. It was the next one.
Wow.
What can we do for our high performing, ambitious, entrepreneurial listeners to collapse that for them so that they can get to that state of integrating those positive habits quicker and without having to go through the pains that you and I have?
So I think there's two things. I think first of all, it requires a mindset shift. And the shift that I've experienced is that it's not the harder I work, the more successful I'll be, the more hours I do equals the more output. It's actually the more I invest in myself, the more I look after myself, the better I perform. So, for example, you see a lot of whether it's entrepreneurs or people working within an organization and they don't take breaks. Like that is counterintuitive to your productivity and your performance. And also going on your phone, like first thing in the morning. Like, for example, I was booked to speak at this incredible event in Dubai and they've just postponed it. And I'm like, I'm gutted because I was really like up for that and it was going to be really exciting. So there's two things now. One, I'm already ready before I read that email. Like I've done my morning routine, I've done my positive habits. I'm like resilient. I'm feeling like really energized, really strong, and I can take that email. Whereas if I had just looked at that first thing in the morning, it would have had a different effect on me, and then it would have kind of negatively impacted the rest of my day. Whereas I can look at that objectively now and go, do you know what? A, it's not happening. It's just going to happen at a different time. And B, it allows me an opportunity to do something else with those few days. Whereas I think when we're in this cycle of like not sleeping that well, feeling run down, stressed about everything, chaotic with our sleep, we don't make as good decisions and we don't think as clearly.
And we lose that perspective as well,
Yes,
right? Like your head down,
absolutely,
you're too close to
absolutely.
it. You take these things personally as
Yeah.
well. What can you speak to with the guilt that might come up for someone? So as much as you're like, yep, I know it. Like I've heard you say it, I've heard others say it, I've read the books, but it's not actually happening. Like mentally I get it. Logically I'm kind of like processing that information, but like it's still not translating to the actions that I'm taking, the habits I'm integrating into a daily basis. And I wonder how much the guilt comes up. I wonder how it can feel comforting to like, oh, I did work. So it can, I feel like as humans, we crave that certainty. And if we know that we can rely on ourselves, well, I can rely to put in the more hours and it's kind of, it's a misplaced craving of certainty, I think. So I think there's that guilt that might come up for some people of like, I can't take that luxury of reading a book in the morning. I've got stuff to do. What can you speak to that?
Yeah, but that's the mindset shift. And this is the honestly, this is the biggest learning I've learned is that if you think like that, then you'll always be in this state of stress. Like I'm sitting here now, I've taken a whole day out of my diary to come to London to have this amazing conversation with
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah, no, but I'm really thrilled, and I've had to overcome some thoughts of, well, I could be doing X, Y, and Z, but actually, is this something I want to do? Yes. Is this something I'll enjoy? Yes. Is this something that could benefit my, the impact I'm trying to create in the world? Yes. So I think it's about recognizing, you can't push guilt away. It's about recognizing it's going to come up. But also, like, I go to bed every night and often I get those thoughts like, oh, I haven't done that yet. I could have done that. I could have done that. Think, I did my best today, and tomorrow we go again. But actually, I think one thing we shouldn't forget is that we are also living our lives. Like a lot of people wish things away, don't they? They're waiting for the next thing, and an entrepreneur might be waiting for an investor, or they might be waiting for their next big gig or whatever. But actually, meanwhile, life is happening all around us, and we shouldn't forget. Like this is a journey. This is an experience. Like I think it's a real privilege to be an entrepreneur, to start your own thing, no matter how it goes. I feel so like grateful to have created this opportunity for myself, but I just want to enjoy it. And if I wake up one morning and I feel like going for a long walk and not going straight into my emails or like jumping on a call, then that's what we need to be able to do and not feel guilty
100%,
about
yeah.
it.
I'm just laughing at that wonderful comment there, Kat, because I literally had the same conversation with a friend just the other day and it was like, time's still passing, which means life is still living. And it really is, especially in business and especially when you have your own business as an entrepreneur. It is where I just need to do this. I just need to like tick that thing off my list, get to that point. And you're like, this is still your life in the meantime. Life is happening in the meantime, not once you've got these other things out of the way.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest mistake we can make in life and in business is to say, I'll enjoy my life when. Mm-mm. You know, and it's also that if you read a lot about like happiness and, I'll be happy when. And then you realize, like, I thought that about a new car. I thought when I had a new car, I'd be like really happy. Or when I'd left my job and started my own business, or when I was in a new relationship, all these things. Then you realize like happiness is an inside job,
What
actually.
makes you happy these days?
Oh, what makes me happy? Everything that I'm doing, like this mission is making me really happy. But I think ultimately what's making me happy is the way I live my life. That ability to have control over my thoughts and my behaviors, my habits. And I'm really proud of, and going back to something you said earlier about how we almost tell our subconscious things, we commit to things the night before and then we let ourselves down. And we do that very easily with ourselves, but not with other people. I'm really proud that most of the time, and I live by an 80-20 rule, but most of the time I am doing the things that I say I'm going to do. And I do a lot of things that don't feel good in the moment, but I know are good for me
In the long run.
in the long run.
Yeah.
Even if that's something I'm going to benefit from later that day or later that week. I'm really proud of being able to do that consistently. And that for me is really important because I don't want to be promoting something that I'm not experiencing and living and breathing myself.
Yeah, 100%. And that definitely comes through, Kat. I love all of that. And what comes to mind for me is in the earlier stages of entrepreneurship, especially if there are some like first time founders, as much as what we're saying makes complete sense. And by the way, I think 80-20, I think even if you're doing 80% is phenomenal. I don't know if that's just comparative to me, my own benchmark, but if you're keeping the promises that you make to yourself 80% of the time, I think that's fantastic. But I'm just aware of there are, different ages, different stages, and whether it's different seasons of our life, different stages of business. I feel like post product market fit, if we use the startup lingo with that, once you've got the traction, you can set up systems, all these things become scalable. But in those first few weeks, few months, that first year, where yes, it's still your life and these things are happening, but there is still that pressure to perform. I'd love you to share like any more kind of evidence as to how maybe delaying checking your emails an hour later is not going to be the end of the world.
I think it's just that simple thing of, will anyone die from this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it also, it's, I think the biggest kind of idea I can share is just, okay, I'm going to tell you a story to explain this. So I worked a little while ago with a group of superintendents. And one of the things I get them to do in all my talks is imagine a day in the life of yourself, right? So from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, what are some of the things you're doing that you know are negatively impacting you? And this superintendent was incredibly brave and incredibly open to stand up and share. And she said that one of the things she was doing within a nanosecond of opening her eyes, so one eye shut kind of idea,
Mm-hmm.
was reading the daily briefing. The daily briefing is a report of the most horrific crimes that have happened in the last 24 hours. These superintendents work in child abuse, so we can imagine what's on that report. Now, what was interesting about it is when we started to unpick it and said, right, what's the impact on her on that day? What's the impact if she does that 5 days in a week, every month, every year, and so on? And, we don't even need to kind of spend any time thinking about that because we already know what the impact would be. We already know it wouldn't be positive. So I think it's the same with entrepreneurs. So if you woke up and you were waiting for an email from an investor or about a product or whatever it is, and it's immediately negative, or you read some like social stuff or some news or whatever, I don't believe our brains are ready for that information. And I think that that superintendent, she went away and she created some space, and I call it the yellow box. So just giving yourself just 10 minutes, just giving yourself a little bit of space to get yourself in the right headspace. Because I think this is the challenge. We're all living in autopilot. Most people are sleeping with their phones. I was looking at some crazy stats the other day of the amount of people not just sleeping with their phones, as in phone next to their bed, but actually on their pillow.
Wow.
Like so afraid that they're
Okay.
going to miss something.
That's gross.
But very, very like real. And I think if we recognize that if we were to just delay it, even if it was just for 10 minutes, and in that 10 minutes we just got some fresh air, we did a dance around our kitchen, we just sat in silence for a minute, God forbid, or anything that got us in a mental and physical state, we would be able to handle that information in a totally different way.
Yeah.
So I do understand, having, started a business from the seed of an idea, and now 3 years later, I do understand the pressures, and especially when it's yourself and you're kind of in your own thoughts a lot of the time. But it will completely transform your performance, both personally and professionally, if you create space for yourself, even if it's just 10 minutes.
Yeah. I think this is kind of what you said with your story as well. I think there is such a lack of respect that we do give our physical bodies. I think that we're living in the information age right now. We are majority, at least like in our circles, we're knowledge workers. All of that worth, that value is put on our brains. How fast can we go? We can't keep up with technology, and we overlook our body still having its basic needs.
Yes, I totally agree. To me, this is like, it's funny actually, because someone made fun of me a little while ago, and I'm totally cool with all this stuff now because I've been doing it and I'm so confident in the results I know that I can help people achieve. But it is funny when people say, Kat, you get paid to tell people things they already know. I'm like, I know. I know. We know all this stuff, but we don't do it. And part of the reason we don't do it is because life is running too fast.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you're right. We're over consuming and we're underproducing. And if you think about the typical person, if they're looking at their phone as soon as they wake up, and then they're consuming information all day in different ways, talking to people, doing stuff on their phones, whatever their job is, or if they're an entrepreneur, and then we're doing that at night, just before we go to sleep, then we finally put it down, or people fall asleep to it. When is there any space to rest or to have creative ideas? And that's why this is so critical.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting now is if you look at some of the data around like the Global Mental State of the World report, people are more, even though there are more initiatives, that people are more stressed and more overwhelmed and more exhausted than they've ever been. And I know it's because of our habits.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we recognize how much information there is being input. And you know, you're saying about even having that space to think and be creative, let alone that. I mean, even just processing, just digesting this much. I heard as well, like similarly as well, like by the time we do go to bed, that's the only time when we have finally put down our phone, even if we do take our phone to bed with us. That's for a lot of people the first time that they are left alone in peace and quiet, alone with those thoughts. If you don't, to your early point on the breaks, if you don't create those breaks and those spaces for it throughout the day, throughout the week, then it all kind of comes crashing down at night. And that feeds into you having the bad night's sleep, and that's that vicious circle. What can you speak to in terms of managing others? Because I feel like I would definitely want to talk about other habits and things, but I feel like definitely for me, right, I'm like, okay, I'll do those things, but whether I have got an investor breathing down my neck or a bit of an aggy client or whatever the situation is, no man is an island, as the saying goes, right? So you laughed at that question. I'm curious to hear what's your answer on that.
Look, you can only control what you can control. You can't control what other people are going to say and do. And again, I think the more positive habits you have, the better you can manage those things. And I think I look back to my career where I was so-called successful, and I think I could have been like 10 times better than I was if I had had control over myself.
Interesting.
And I think that about my relationships as well as my physical and mental health. So I think it's about and I also think there's something interesting about role modeling. So if whether it's an investor or a colleague or a contractor you're working with, it's uncomfortable sometimes to share that we're doing something for ourselves, because it could be seen that you're not working hard enough.
Yeah.
Because you're taking some time out to do leisure activities, when it's actually, well, if you don't have a healthy body and brain, how can you possibly scale your startup? How can you possibly run a huge company or fulfill any dreams or goals that you have? How can you even do it? So for me, it's just such a paradigm of conflicting messages, because your investor wants you to achieve these really amazing, ambitious goals, but yet you, as an individual, you need to be in a good place to do that. And I recently spoke at an event in Saudi, which was incredible. And I was speaking at a conference about the impact of AI on well-being and resilience. And I could sum my whole talk up in just a few seconds, which is basically we can't take advantage of any of this amazing stuff if we are not okay. It's that simple.
Yeah.
You
100%.
cannot scale a startup if you are not putting if you're not feeding your brain good brain food, and if you are not fueling your body.
Yeah, resilience is such a non-negotiable, isn't it? And in order to keep going for as long as you need to, whatever your endeavor is, you need to make sure that you've got those sustainable practices in place to maintain that kind of resilience. You're making me laugh with the role modeling. I think probably one of the best, if not the best, role model for that happens to be a walking advert for his business anyway. I also had Hector Hughes on the show.
I know Hector. So lovely. Yeah, I've worked with his team. He's a great
incredible guy. Gang, you need to check out that episode. I'm going to link it in the show notes. But even just obviously for me, I'm physically sat here in person across the table from him, but I hope his kind of vibe came across to the listeners as well. But he just exudes that zen, that calm. And he really talks about how important it is for him to show up as a leader in that way as well for his team. So, so there are some real role models out there that we can actually kind of point to and look to in this day and age, thankfully now. I mentioned before about double clicking back into working smarter, not harder. You mentioned it again. So let's talk about that. Can you expand on why working harder isn't the best strategy? I know we're talking about why it makes sense to be your best self, but I'm just curious to get your angle, I guess, from how, especially in entrepreneurship, you just don't always get out what you put in and how much kind of luck and all these other kind of things come into the equation.
I think so. Let's talk about thoughts for a second.
Mhm.
So when I was thinking about starting my own mission, so I was on a great salary, I was in a very comfortable job, and I remember telling my dad, I've got an idea. And by the way, I never had any dreams to become an entrepreneur or start a business, even though I actually come from quite an entrepreneurial family.
Mhm.
I was very happy working for someone else, making someone else, happy, and I loved being employed. But I had this idea and I couldn't let it go. And I didn't know what it looked like at the time, but I spoke to my dad and he said, "Oh, why would you want to leave a safe job?" And it was that one, his thought, and actually now I realize a self-limiting belief
Mhm.
that nearly stopped me from moving forward. And then when I did um, sort of think about those thoughts, well, it was all swirling around in my head, like his thought, his comment of, you know, oh, maybe you should stay safe, stay in this job. And then I was sort of battling with this other side of me. It was like, but there's something here. You've got there's something you need to explore here. And do you know what I did? And this is one of the best habits I can recommend is I got it down on paper. I
Mm.
mean, it's known as journaling, but again, journaling for me has got some weird connotations. So I just like to call it brain dumping, whatever you like. Just we
It's
have
paper.
yeah, we have thousands of thoughts every single day and a lot of them are sabotaging us. So I put these thoughts down on paper and I thought, right. And once you and I've heard this other great thing recently, which was take your thoughts to court.
Yeah.
Like really challenge them. And I wrote it down in black and white. I wrote down exactly what he said. And I was like, is that true? No, it's not. Because A, they've given me a 1-year contract, which might not get renewed. Like B, if I jumped ship, tried my own thing and it didn't work out, could I get another job? Evidence, I've always had a job. Yes. So then it doesn't feel as scary. But then when I did start, when I resigned and I was working my notice period and I started putting my foot into the entrepreneurial world, I then got a whole raft of other thoughts. Like, where am I going to find opportunities? Who's going to pay me? Is anyone even going to learn anything from this? Is anyone even going to care? So again, I just wrote those thoughts down and started to really unpick them. And I think that is a really, really powerful, high performing way to operate as an entrepreneur. And I think if you don't do that, you lose a lot of opportunities, you lose a lot of your power. And especially in this crazy fast paced world we find ourselves in now, like it's even more important.
Mm.
And I think the other thing that I've learned as well is just to trust. So you can do a lot, you can put in a lot of effort. And I think, like, if you follow Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks a lot about this, you know, manifesting, whatever you desire isn't about just imagining it and it will just suddenly happen by accident. It's also about putting in the work, but also I think we have to trust that if we put in the effort, that that our lives and our businesses will take us on the journey that we're supposed to go on.
Yeah, yeah. That dad comment is so generational as well, isn't it? It's such a like this is where you've got to be careful of like who that advice is coming from, right? Like, is it the Baz Luhrmann, the sun always wear sunscreen song? One of the lyrics is like,
Yeah.
be careful who you take that
Yeah.
advice. It's just the best bits, recycled, polished stuff. And
However, Steph, I remember when I started my career, I was a teacher, and I saw this job working for this tech company that I had the amazing career with, and it was double the salary. And I remember showing a teacher friend who was the same sort of age. I thought we were kind of quite similar in terms of our ambition, and she said, "You won't get it." And I was like, well, how do you know I won't get it? I haven't even applied for it yet. She said, you won't get it. Look at the salary and look at you. I was like, right.
Honestly, it makes me laugh so much. One of the biggest truisms is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I find myself saying it multiple times on a daily basis. I'm like, why? And again, it's like telling people what they already know. But I'm like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I cannot stand people like that. I seesaw between having like an allergic repellent reaction from people like that, but also finding it funny because it's just.
Yeah.
These are projections as well, right? Like
They
she's not
are.
telling you.
No.
It's herself. And
But I'm a massive empath. And I think now, I think before I would have judged, and I definitely did. I was very, very judgmental about a lot of people's opinions. And now I look at people's kind of responses to things, and I think, what has happened to you for you to say that, and like, where is your lack of confidence coming from, and things like that. So I think it is important to recognize that. And this is, my dad, and if you read the Chimp Paradox, like, I've realized that he was trying to keep you safe.
yeah, of course.
And he
Yeah, sure.
it wasn't like he was doing it out of love,
Yeah, of
which is also
course.
kind of the crazy thing to get your head around,
Yeah.
isn't it? And I'm really conscious now that whenever I'm speaking and in my content, that I don't tell people what to do. What I'm trying to do is create an opportunity for people to just stop for a minute, think differently, and then create a habit that works for them.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. Well, that ruins my next question.
Oh no, sorry.
To ask you about more habits.
You can ask me about as many habits as you like.
Well, obviously, okay, so we can't have a conversation about habits without mentioning, of course, James Clear, Atomic Habits, phenomenal book. Read that one while it's out until Kat's book is available. So we'll put the link to pre-order if it's available. But there are so many like one-liners and concepts that have just been quoted over and over from his book. One of them is you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So what can you speak to in terms of, like, I think this is the huge power of habits, is that they are systems ingrained within us individually as humans, and they can be positive, negative, right? And we'll talk about the negative because we've also said about how another great quote is when the weight of habits can become too heavy, you can't break the chains. Like we're saying about phone, like doom scrolling is always the best example. So I want to talk about breaking those habits as well as creating new ones. But what other advice, you said before there about not giving any other specific advice. You've got to do what works for you and whatever habits you can create. But what can you speak to in terms of getting those like systems set up so that even if it's the little things, I know you keep it very practical, easily integratable into your lifestyle. We kicked off the conversation with like moving our bodies. Are there any other little inspirational tidbits you could share?
One of the best ones is getting a home for your phone.
Uh-huh.
So one of the reasons I put my phone here was because what's interesting about when your phone is next to you is it's, as James Clear talks about, it's a cue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's becoming, especially with our phones, it's becoming such an unconscious cue. So if you were to look at how many times you pick up your phone, you'd be horrified. And one of the challenges with our phones is it goes everywhere. And I'm kind of more and more, the more control I get over my phone, the more horrified I am at phone habits out in the world.
Yeah, same.
And I think a few years ago I stopped taking my phone into my bedroom, and it was a total game changer. And when I tell people that, I feel like I'm met with these like reactions,
Shock
like
horror.
yeah, like what? How do you do?
So extreme.
Yeah, and people, it's so fascinating. Like if I was going to have my life again, I'd love to study psychology and people's reactions, because
Yeah.
some people get really defensive and say, and almost like challenge me, like, well, that might work for you,
Right.
because you don't have kids, or
Right.
you have like a poorly mother or whatever, but that would just never work for me.
Mhm.
And I just love those conversations, because I'm like, okay, let's talk about why it won't work for you. And I also know, because I used to be totally defensive myself about everything, so I was resistant to change. And like a home for your phone, though, has this ability to change I mean, literally everything in your life gets better.
Mm.
And it's so incredible. And then if you just find, if you need still an alarm to wake up, you just find an alternative.
Mm.
One of my favorites actually is just my Fitbit gently vibrates on my wrist. It kind of depends who you share your bedroom with, you know, maybe a light alarm or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, the interesting thing is once your phone is no longer the cue anymore, aka you can't see it, it's out of sight, out of mind, you then kind of go into a different state. And whether you pick up a book or you do nothing, which is again almost unheard of these days, but whatever it is you choose to do instead of that, it's usually something very positive and very good for you.
Mm.
But honestly, a home for your phone. And I remember one guy in one of the talks, he said, he literally just sort of sat back and said, "Oh my God, you've just made me realize something." He said, "I walk through the door every night and I'm half writing an email. And my son, who must have been like 2 or 3 years old, because the way he described his son, like would run up to me and cuddle my leg. And I'm not even like giving him my attention.
Mm.
I'm still half writing the email."
Mm.
And then he went on to say, "And do you know what's even worse, Kat? I'm scrolling Instagram whilst he's in the bath." And I've just realized, like, what am I doing?
Mm.
Like, what are we doing?
Mm.
And I think, you know, I don't know about you, but lots of people I talk to can relate to this. So you get home, let's say you've got someone in your home, like a loved one or a family member, you're watching TV and you've both got your phones next to you. Like, why? Like, if you just question it for a second, why?
Mm.
What happens is when you pause the TV and one goes to the loo or goes to get a drink,
Mm.
what does the other one do instantly?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly.
And then they're looking at their phones. And then I always say to people, "And what is it you're looking at?" And we all know it's just nonsense.
Yeah.
But what happens is what I've learned and definitely learned the hard way is the connection between you and that person. I mean, because you're already doing a fairly passive activity like watching a film or TV or whatever.
Mm.
But then the connection,
Is eroded.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like you see that time and time again. And I think what's more scary, and again, don't have a TV in the bedroom either,
Mm-hmm.
is couples that go to bed with their phones and they're double screening essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what are we doing
Yeah.
to our relationships?
I think you're so right to just bring up that question of what, like, no judgment, safe space. A lot of us do it. But when you have those pattern interrupts, I think that's the big thing. Even just stopping and asking why. Nobody does. It is, and this again, that's the dark side of the habits. And what people, I don't know how consciously they realize this, but the seriously advanced level of mass media manipulation that we have with these devices and platforms at the moment are next level. This is manipulation at like an insane level. And so even as fully developed adults, we don't stand a chance against these hacks and nudges and cues and everything that these tech giants have created. There's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg's children go to a tech-free Montessori school with no screens and they play with wooden bricks, right? And I think what you shared there is like sometimes there's either a catalyst with children, I've definitely seen, or a life event or something has to happen to shock somebody out the system. And what I'm trying to do with this interview with you is also just try to like, how can we try and get more people to that state without the need to suddenly wake up and realize they've spent more time looking at their phone instead of playing with their baby in the bath or getting to having a heart attack. I remember I was waiting for a friend, this is like ages ago as well now, but I was waiting for a friend in a restaurant to meet them for dinner. And I was just sat there. I was very happy. Like,
just to sit.
Just sat there.
Yeah.
Chilling, like maybe a bit of people watching, looking out the window. I mean, I also live in the best city in the world, in my opinion. And I remember when she showed up and she was like, "It's so cool." Because I think she maybe saw me from the window and like coming. She was like, "It's so cool. You're just sat there. You're just not on your phone."
I thought she was going to say, "You're right."
Yeah, no, like what,
check your temperature.
No, obviously I was like the only person in the restaurant to do that. And I think it's, so,
a great practice to really encourage people to do.
Yeah.
I've tried it now for quite a few years. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't have these urges and slip into those old habits sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think what's different when you start practicing this is your level of consciousness. And it does feel uncomfortable to sit for even a few seconds, let alone a few minutes, without your phone. But I think, again, doing a lot of activities like sauna or going to the gym
You
or
can't.
running, where you literally are forced to have that
So
space.
nice.
It's
Swimming. I was swimming. I was like, so am I. I can't be on my phone.
yeah. But it's really good to try it when you could be on your phone.
Of course, that's next
So
level.
so like when you get home, putting it in a drawer or putting it on, like I've got these stands now, these like yellow stands for people I give out at events,
Nice.
and just putting that there, and it's like. And also notifications. Like I've turned off all the notifications.
I have never, and again, apologise if this is going to come across sounding like holier than thou, because I'm definitely not perfect whatsoever. But since I've owned a smartphone, I have never had my notifications on, never, because I own my phone, not the other way around. I don't, literally
I
never.
think that's really unusual.
Yeah, it is.
And do you know, I was actually doing I was recording an in-person podcast before with someone else, and they had their phone up and all these notifications were pinging. And we were talking about this exact topic. And I said, your phone is actually distracting me from what I'm saying right
so
now.
distracting.
And it's that, but like you say, going back to tech giants, that's exactly what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And I remember Gary V, love him or hate him, there's a brilliant video of him, and there was a mother who came up to him at one of his events, and she said, look, I've got this 15-year-old daughter. She's always on her phone. I feel like she's got really heavy anxiety, lots of issues. I don't know what to do for the best. I feel like taking the phone off her. And he gave this piece of absolute gold. And he said, you cannot take her phone away from her. It's part of her world. It's all she knows. It's how she communicates with her peers. But what you can do is build her self-esteem so high that anything she sees online on her phone, she'll be able to handle.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I think that as adults, you know, we also need to start becoming more mindful of our phone habits, especially because what we are doing is role modeling to children and to young people and to each other what's acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
And if I'm talking to someone and they're looking at the phone, I just stop talking.
Same.
I literally
Can't stand it.
I can't stand it.
Can't stand it.
And I think it's like Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Once you open it,
Yeah.
you can't close it, and you notice it everywhere. And you know, my biggest challenge, I think, is when I see people like talking to someone whilst they're trying to like interact with like a shop assistant or something. It's like we have lost the ability to kind of respect each other's attention currency is becoming very rare.
100%, 100%. I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but I am noting how much the conversation has gone to social media, tech, phones, and how many parallels there are actually with like the Hector Hughes and the Unplugged mission as well. I mean, they have a minimum of a 3-night stay, and that is baked in, non-negotiable. If you want to stay less, you literally can't, because it takes that amount of time to really feel the benefits and to switch off from it. Any more that you can speak to in terms of like breaking the chains of the negative habits aside from social media? If anyone else has got any kind of habits, cues they're not even really thinking about kind of subconsciously, on the flip side of the positive habit building, is there any more you want to speak to on breaking the negative habits?
So if you go back to the essential, I guess, framework for breaking a habit or building a good one, it's first and foremost, it is that cue, that association. So, and I was watching this funny video this morning of this PT who was saying, if I let my brain choose all the foods I wanted to eat, this is everything I would eat. And he had this handful of like lovely foods that we all like to eat, but foods that aren't very good for us. And I think, for example, food. So if we go back to the mental state of the World Report 2023, that there are 3 top contributing factors to poor mental health globally. Number 1 is a smartphone, which we've talked about. The second one and the third one are very interesting. The second one is food, the increase of ultra-processed food. And the third one is connection and lack of family bonds. If you look at food, I think one of the things I've really changed over the last few years is really being much more aware of what I'm putting in my body. And it is becoming, by the way, more difficult than ever to know whether what you're eating is good for you or not, because everything's labeled
Yeah.
like healthy, high protein,
Right.
natural.
Right.
But actually, you have to be like a detective,
Yeah.
work out
So true.
whether this is actually good for my body or not.
Yeah.
And everyone's telling you different things. So I totally appreciate that this is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember like working with a PT for the first time a few years ago, and he was like, right, Kat, I want to know about your steps and what you're putting in your body and like your calories and different types of foods you're eating. And I was like, no dramas. I've got a dog. I'm out walking all the time and I eat really well because I'm vegetarian. Don't worry, I've got all this. And then he basically got me to plug it all into a calorie counting app, including my steps, right? And I was horrified. After 7 days, I realized I was lying to myself. And I was partly lying, but partly I was just completely oblivious.
Okay.
So I used to take my dog to like a drive to a field or a park or something, stand by the coffee van, have a coffee, which was probably like, 250 calories or whatever, have a good old chat, let my dog run around, but I didn't actually move. So my steps were like ridiculous compared to what I thought.
Yeah.
And then secondly, all the things that I thought I was eating, I was missing about half of them because they don't count. Like that lovely dip that you get like
Right.
with pizza that was like
Right.
500 calories full of oil.
Right.
Like I just didn't count that because
Yeah,
that
yeah.
wasn't like part of the pizza.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think what's so important is that we become aware of, like, for example, foods you're eating. I think a really good habit is just preparing it, and not, you don't have to do some crazy big meal prep, but just thinking, right, what am I going to eat tomorrow?
Mm.
And if you prepare just a few minutes, and that, by the way, and it's almost overwhelming, but there are so many good videos of like food prep. I've seen like amazing like creators like make food prep bags like for big families and things. And I think if you just prepped one meal,
Mm.
then that's one better decision you're going to make about food tomorrow that you wouldn't make otherwise.
Yeah. My partner is a massive, foodie. Like he's just incredible in the kitchen, and he was almost going to go on MasterChef and everything. It's like amazing. Just to illustrate just how much of like a chef at home he is. We have never, in the 15 years we've been together, have never bought like a jar of pasta sauce, because he's like, just throw in some tomatoes, garlic, olive oil, and whip it up and it's done. So like, just to like illustrate. And with him, obviously this is an extreme example, but what comes to mind is some of the gorgeous, delicious things that he makes. It's like when you're actually there having to like source those ingredients and measure and put them all in. I mean, a while ago he was into like French baking and he made croissants, and it was like the amount of butter in these croissants. It's just stuff that you don't, if you're constantly just getting stuff off the shelf and eating whatever, like you don't actually realize kind of what goes into it. So that is definitely an extreme example. We're not all Spencers in this world, but yeah, I think your point on, I think what's really kind of coming across throughout all of this is take a beat with all of it, right? Whether it's not looking at your phone first thing in the morning, not reaching for wherever convenient fast food is available. Just take a moment, and I think the very first thing is like, you do have a moment. You do have one moment or 10 minutes or an hour. Like no one is going to die, to your point. And if you start setting up those smaller habits, it's just going to have that like transformative effect.
Yeah.
So,
and I look at packets now
Mhm.
and I think, what's in that?
Mm.
And what is in that makes it stay on a shelf for a year?
Yeah, disgusting. Yeah.
And do I want to put that in my body?
Yeah.
And I also think when you just focus on one thing,
Mm.
it really doesn't matter what it is. I mean, of course, there are some habits that I've experienced that I think have a greater impact faster, but food and movement are definitely two of those.
Yeah.
But if you focus on one of those, you start to feel better. Like if you start fueling your body with better nutrition, you almost instantly feel better. And then after a few days, you're like, well, this feels great. So now I'm going to actually start moving my body. And then I'm actually going to do, and then I've got more energy. So now I can do
Yeah.
other things. And so, but I think part of it is it's raising your awareness. So whenever it comes to choosing something to eat, I will think, right, what have I got to do today? What else am I going to eat? How's this going to make me feel?
Yeah.
Is this the best alternative I can choose? And, there are days, I love pizza. There are days where I'm just like, I just want to eat a pizza. And by the way, I don't think any foods are bad for you. I think that's a really bad culture and a bad mindset. I think if you make good choices most of the time, you are winning.
It's the 80-20 again.
Yeah,
Right?
it is. It is. But I think once you start to think, do I need to pick up my phone right now? What food is going to fuel me today? You have won.
Yeah.
Whether you make a good choice from there or not, actually, you've won because you're thinking differently and you're conscious.
Can you give any helpful advice on that pattern interrupt? Can you give anything? So we all know that, like, discipline, even for the most self-disciplined of us, is not an infinite resource that we can rely on, right? So when that self-discipline wears out, are there any other go-tos on that pattern interrupt before, again, I'm kind of like in that awkward stage before a bad habit is broken or while you're trying to build a good habit? Any psychological kind of tips on the pattern interrupt that's needed, that taking a beat, the before? Because again, the thing is, like, the phone example is just the best one. It's like, it's always near us. It's with it. It's within arm's reach. How often are we further away from our phone that it's not in arm's reach?
Yeah.
Literally.
I mean, I'll give you two examples that I've seen. One is like literally I've seen people writing post-it notes on their phone,
Yeah,
by
exactly.
their beds, whatever.
Amazing.
Literally telling them or reminding them how that makes them feel. But actually for me, what worked the best was thinking, what kind of person do I want to become? And what do I actually want to achieve in my life? And going back to what we talked about earlier on in the episode about this idea of, so I really want to, travel to a lot of different places still. And how am I going to be able to travel to those places? How am I going to speak on bigger stages? How am I going to create the impact I want in the world if I haven't got legs that are going to take me there? It's that simple. So if I wake up in the morning and my brain, my chimp tries to tell me, oh, you're tired, you don't need to go to the gym today, or you don't need to do this, you don't need to do that, I revert back to what kind of person am I?
Love that.
And also, I think if you think of yourself on your deathbed, if you met your future self, would you be happy with them, with how you are now? Would you feel like you are like being truthful to yourself? And if you are, then great, like happy for you.
But these are all exercises to help regain that perspective.
Yeah.
Aren't they? I love that you mentioned the identities. It's like one of my favorite topics. I'm having to like bite my tongue because that would be a whole other like 3-hour episode. But I'm obsessed with that as well. That's such an important. I'm really glad that we managed to touch at least on that point as well. Is like how we self-identify is the single biggest motivating driver for anything that we do, good or bad. So yeah, I love that little tip there, Kat. Who do you want to be? Who's the person that you're trying to become or that you can see that you can become, and how does that person, it's even like that great superintendent exercise you mentioned as well with like the day in the life. I think a version of that I've come across is this is kind of Gary Vee thing as well, actually. It's like, imagine you've got cameramen following you around for a day, and it's almost like watching a documentary of a day in your life. So you've got kind of two things where you've got one, which is like getting that perspective of what does a typical day actually look like. But also if you had somebody following you around of every second of every minute of every day, what would change about the things that you do? My penultimate question, because I'm just like geeking out on the whole like habit psychology, I just love all of this, is again to reference The Godfather, Mr. Clear. He talks about all these other sort of ways to build a good habit or break a bad one. One of them is the habit stacking as well. So I'm curious if anything like that has helped you, either like habit stacking specifically or anything similar that's helped to get those good habits in place.
I think the one for me was kind of getting rid of one that you don't want and replacing it with one that you do want. So, for example, ditching the scroll first thing in the morning and getting out of the door as quickly as you can was something that worked in the early days for me. I know people who have kind of uncovered treadmills that have been used for, washing lines and things, who have paired it with, and I know James Clear talks about this as well, like their favorite TV show. So they're on the treadmill, but they're getting to binge
Uh-huh.
something they like
Right.
watching. So, and for me, one of the things that's really worked is like I love now a morning coffee, but I don't allow myself to have it until I've done my things.
Okay, nice.
So there's also that kind of delaying of the reward.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and then I really enjoy it because I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, girl,
You said
you've
you're
done your good
gamifying
stuff.
it.
Yeah, you've done your good stuff. But ultimately, I think all of this is down to the more space you create. And I think having that blank piece of paper to really tell yourself the truth about your thoughts, having that space then allows you to reach another level of consciousness and ultimately performance because you realize that all of these habits are either holding you back or they're about to unlock some serious potential inside of you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think our brain wants to dismiss things like 10 minutes is not good enough, when actually 10 minutes could increase your performance by 15%. So, entrepreneurs, for example, who are like, I haven't got time to exercise, what if I told you that just doing 10 minutes of something could increase your performance by 15%? You might all of a sudden listen to that.
Mm.
So, sometimes we need data to really give ourselves that proof. But
Mm.
actually, for me, data isn't important. It's like how you feel and then how you perform. And then everything, when you see this ripple effect, it's actually way more than 15%.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
actually unquantifiable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to do just walking meetings with my team before. I used to just, if we have a weekly team catch up call, I'd just do it on the phone on the move. Like if we're not screen sharing, you don't have to show me. And I think this is also one of my big gripes as well with like the world of work and the status quo. There's so much that's just not even questioned with the way that we work. It took a pandemic. It's absolutely insane. It took a global pandemic to accelerate flexible working and what we can do. And I love it. I am a huge proponent of remote flexible working. And honestly, I've been gagging for it. I've been like the job I had before the pandemic, before I set up my previous business. So when was this? This would have been, just to put like some dates on this was like 2015, 2016. So like literally a decade ago. And it was only that job where they were like super like pushing the envelope and being really innovative and breaking the boundaries and the rules, where we could work from home once a week. And I remember I would put in so much more like I would go the extra mile to give my boss the confidence in how well I was working because I loved it so, so much. And there's bits with this as well, with what you're saying, so with going right the way back to the beginning of the episode as well, with like move your body. Why is a Zoom, like we spoke on the phone yesterday, right? Like, why is a Zoom the go-to default for people? I think, okay, unless you've got maybe a bigger group or you've got something to share and like, is there really a real reason? Otherwise, can we walk and talk on the phone? Like, that's a way to hit two birds with one stone, move your body, and you're thinking better and thinking fresher and oxygenating your lungs in the meantime.
Totally. And do you know what? In the pandemic, there were some really good habits. Like
Yeah.
walk and talks was one of them.
Yeah.
And I often talk about this. Do you remember when Boris Johnson like locked us down that first March, and he said you can only go out once a day, and everyone
Took that once a
went
day.
out. Like I remember seeing people on my street that I've never seen since. And unfortunately,
Oh, that's
as
so
much as I know there are lots of people like you who really value it and who really thrive on working from home. Unfortunately, there's also this huge population of people who are actually struggling with it
Yeah,
because it's
sure.
they're having to prove that they're working as hard as they are,
Yeah.
and they're not getting this separation.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually, it's created a lot of unhealthy habits, which is like they're
Mm,
always on.
mm.
And I think there are times when we need to be more on than others. And definitely entrepreneurs can relate to this at different stages of growing your business. But ultimately, if you cannot give yourself 10 minutes a day, like what's the point?
Yeah, 100%. You're totally right. And I was reading this book recently, which did just kind of talk about like the way the world of work and how much it's changed and how we used to, I mean, besides like office work, but like the agricultural revolution going as far back as like you'd have to go to the farm, you'd have to go to the factory at the beginning of the industrial revolution, you'd have to go. And now you're right. It's like, well, are we working from home or do we live at work? And how those
Ooh,
boundaries
yeah.
have become so much blurred as well. Kat, I could definitely talk to you for hours. If you can't already tell, I could geek out on habits and psychology until the cows come home. I think just one last thing I do just want to mention before I wrap here is, I've been trying to sort of really sort of dive into sort of different like psychological hacks and tips and tricks. But I think what you've made me realize as well is like how different people are motivated by different things. And I just wanted to underscore a point you made before around like the gamification of it. And so whether it is something like there's a reward, there's that delayed gratification, you get to have your morning coffee when you do this, whether it's the habit stacking, whether you just need that whip cracked on you, there's all these different like tools at your disposal. It's totally possible. We all have these limiting beliefs that we need to overcome, but I think that key thing is just taking a beat and realizing you have a moment for these things.
Yeah, life is way too short. And I think losing my mother at 4 years old showed me that, we treat life like it's got this infinite amount of time for us, and it doesn't,
Yeah.
and we don't know when it's going to be over. So I think, for me, that creates a lot of discipline. And also, I think when you start to do one of these habits, you feel so good that you never want to go back to how you used to
Right.
feel.
Right.
So I think thinking about your bigger dreams in life, reminding yourself of how precious life really is, how much we get stuck in our own heads,
Mm.
but also just that once you start taking action, you already feel that
Yeah.
so good that why would
Yeah.
you ever go back?
It's on the other side. It's waiting for you.
It
The water's
is all,
fine.
it's all available for you. Everything, like loads of energy, like feeling really good. Like I wake up feeling excited. I never
Nice.
used to wake up feeling like that.
Oh, doesn't that go to show?
It's a nice feeling.
It's the little things that really fascinate me as well that you don't even expect. And when you do experience them, it's a nice surprise. And it's only then you can compare to when you didn't have it. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's a transformation.
And a really good shift. I know we're going to finish, but
No,
a
no
really
worries.
good shift is switching from I have to
Yeah.
to I get to.
Mhm.
You get to wake up every day.
Yeah.
Get to go and do what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Nice. Well, before I do wrap with my traditional closing question, are there any other pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share that you haven't already as it relates to psychology and habit building?
I think I've shared like a lot of really
Yeah.
good things. I think for me, if you take one thing away, it's just just do one thing for 10 minutes. That's it.
Nice.
Don't make it any more complicated than that. People run off after my sessions and go, well, I tried to do 2 things. I'm like, did you hear nothing I said? It's called one small habit changes your day for a reason. Just one. Don't be tempted to do 3 or 5. Just one.
One thing, one thing. All right. So, listeners, here's my question to you. What is one small change that you're going to make now, either right now while you're still listening to us, or as soon as you finish listening to this episode? What are you going to do differently to get you closer to becoming the person that you want to be? All right, Kat, my traditional closing question. What is one tragedy that's taught you an unforgettable lesson?
I think it's my mum's death. I think experiencing the death of a parent when you're 4 years old is pretty profound. And of course, I'm very conscious that a lot of us have lost people close to us. But I often think when I'm, battling with my thoughts about whether I should do something that's good for me long term or not, I think she didn't get that chance and I get it. So I've now shifted into a mindset of I get to live this life. I'm privileged to live this life. And I think when you sit in that kind of abundance mindset, your experience of life completely shifts. And I'm no longer taking my body or my brain for granted anymore. And like I said earlier, it's a lifelong commitment. And I think if we just take a moment, step back and realize that we don't know how long we've got, we might start treating ourselves and the people around us differently.
Yeah, nice. Kat, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all these wonderful pearls of wisdom. You've given me so much inspiration. I really hope all of our listeners have taken away something as well. Where can people go to find out more about you?
So you can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram or my website, katthorne.com.
And that's Kat with a K.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. All right. We'll obviously put links and stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. Great to have you. And thank you so much for listening. As always, really appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this, you know what to do. Please give us a little like and a follow if you're not already. Episodes are weekly, so hopefully see you next Wednesday. Take care, gang. Bye.